In this video, I wanted to answer one question. How do I pass the CQA exam on the very first try? If it's your first time here, I'm Subhi, and I'm the co-creator of CQA Academy with Andy Robertson, where between him and I, we've helped thousands of people pass ASQ Certified Quality exams. We're going to cover how to pass the exam. As we're getting started, Andy and I put together a free course as well to help give you a flavor for some of the important critical topics. You can find that in the description below. Now, before we talk about how to study for the exam, it's important to understand beyond the fact that it's just an exam that you're studying, what the actual exam is, because it's not a vocabulary test where they're going to be testing you on your recall. And the reality is the ASQ CQA exam is an open book multiple choice exam that is looking to check, do you understand how audits work? Do you understand how auditors should think and how to apply auditing techniques and principles in realistic situations? The fact that it's an open book test is also really important. That's why we spent a lot of time putting together the exam day guide, which you get with the course. A lot of the people signed up after they failed the exam. And one of the things that they in particular struggled with was the case studies that are presented in the exam. And at the end of each chapter, we highlight what are some examples that you can see. And you'll also see that in the free course, really a sliver of the paid course. Now, open book doesn't necessarily mean easy, by the way. And it just means that you need to make sure that you're going to be able to find the information quickly. Yes, it's open book, which means you have access to the information, but also they know you have access to the information. So they're going to be asking you detailed, thoughtful questions because they know you have reference material. The CQA exam has questions, 15 of which are unscored, and you'll get a little over 5 hours for the exam. The reason that I say a little more than 5 is the appointment itself is 5.5 hours. I've seen online that it says, technically speaking, you get 5 hours and 18 minutes to complete the course. So a little bit of buffer time for admin. And the exam is open book, but that doesn't mean that you want to be learning the material as you're trying to answer the question. So your references should help you confirm, feel comfortable with your answers, but not be there as a crutch. You should be prepared. The CQA exam is built around the body of knowledge, and there are 5 major areas that are highlighted amongst other things. Like we said, passing the exam is not only about making sure that you're diligent and studying all of the materials, but that you're also prioritizing and focusing on the elements that are for sure going to be covered in the exam. The first one is audit fundamentals. Here we're covering things like types of audits, internal versus external, first, second, and third party audit, making sure you're understanding the different types of audit purposes and associated scope, audit criteria, roles and responsibilities, and importantly, ethics, independence, and the legal consequences of audits. Now, going back, the second topic that you need to make sure you understand is the audit process. And here we're covering topics like audit plan, prep, opening and closing meetings, reporting, classifying findings, CAPA and follow-up, and audit closure. Now, the third topic is auditor competency. And here we're talking about auditor characteristics, communication, interviewing. And interviewing, interestingly enough, is one of the most important, most asked about, most scenario question-based topics on the exam: conflict resolution, managing team dynamics, auditor selection, and professional behavior, conduct, and managing the audit team. Topic number 4 is audit program management. What we mean by audit program management is audit program planning, internal audit schedule, external audit schedule, auditor training, your audit program metrics, risk-based frequencies of audits, management review, and more, things like cost of quality and business impact. And then lastly, but certainly not least, quality tools and techniques. And here we're talking about different tools like Pareto charts, cause and effect, diagrams, 5 Whys, Plan, Do, Check, Act, Lean, and 6 Sigma, basic stats, sampling, change control, etc. So the 5 topic buckets, again, are audit fundamentals, audit process, auditor competency, audit program management, audit tools and techniques. So the main takeaway here is to study for the exam as if audits are a process. And ultimately, you need to understand the fundamentals, the overall inner workings of the audit process, the auditor competencies, audit program management, and some of the tools and techniques, particularly in the exam day guide on the most important elements of each topic. I wouldn't study for this exam like memorizing rote, but rather just making sure you understand the process, the different definitions, the different permutations of audits, the different audit objectives. Moving into studying for the exam, I think one of the biggest issues that I see for people that study for these kinds of exams is they want to cover the book end to end, which means the mistake that they make is that they will approach each topic equally, like, oh, I need to cover all the material. They'll open up the body of knowledge or the ASQ book, or even the book that comes with our course, and they'll be like, I need to review this start to finish. They see a long list of topics and they just try and cover them start to bottom. But the reality is, for this exam, what we just covered in the last section is not all of the topics carry the same weight. You will be asked questions on everything most likely, but some topics are important in that they connect everything else. Those topics can show up in different ways from multiple different angles. So passing the CQA exam isn't about studying everything equally. It's about making sure that you are strategic and that you know what you're focusing on first. Now, the other thing that people underestimate and really struggle with from the students that failed the exam and then came and joined our course is they will underestimate the case study portion of it. In other words, they think that I just need to study the topics and show up and make sure I'm covering whatever's in the book. But there is some level of thinking that's needed when you're passing the exam. And ASQ themselves and the body of knowledge tells us that the exam in some cases is based on the material of the book, or the different categories, the differences between a first, second, and third party audit, etc., different types of audit strategies. But they also say that some of the exam is based on case studies where you're given an audit scenario and supporting documents, and where you're given a case study and an audit scenario, and you're expected to answer questions about that situation. And that matters because those questions aren't just asking like, do you remember the definition? They're asking what's important in this kind of situation, or what should the auditor do next? What's the best evidence if you're trying to give an observation? Is the finding that they're presenting to you actually supported by the evidence, or is it a bit of a stretch? You are coming back post audit, or you receive a CAPA plan in your email. Is their proposal acceptable, or is it deficient? This is why the practice questions are so important, and why we made sure with each module, each lecture that we have in the course, to have a quiz associated with it. And then we have exams as you cover a bundle of lectures. The scenario questions and trying to think about how to approach those kinds of situations is really important. That's why we highlighted it in our course, and also made sure to highlight it in the material in terms of how will this manifest potential scenarios coming up, because they're also trying to have you practice judgment based on the topics. So if I were studying for the CQA course, I would focus on the audit process first, because that highlights the ingredients of start with the audit process first, because the audit process kind of shows you soup to nuts, the process flow of an audit. And it helps you understand what are the different things that would change if doing different types of audits. I think the audit process is probably the most important part to focus on, because a lot of the judgment questions are also going to be coming from these two sections, section 2 and section 3. And in the audit process, you're going to be covering your planning, your preparation, your opening meeting, how you collect evidence, like we said before, interviews, findings, classification, reporting, CAPAs, and stuff like that, which it's going to be a significant portion of the exam. Then I would focus on auditor competency, because those are the things that are going to be highlighted from a judgment section. From a judgment perspective, they're going to involve things like independence, ethics, communication, conflict, professionalism. Then I would go into the audit program management, like how internal versus external audits are managed, how the audit schedule is built, how risk affects audit frequency, and how all of the metrics and the different types of audit metrics, how that feeds into management review. And then lastly, I would focus on the different tools and techniques, whether it's root cause analysis, Pareto charts, cause and effect diagrams, et cetera, the stuff that I would talk about. And I would make sure to use practice questions to find my weak spots throughout the whole process, because that's a really important active way of learning. Together, the CQA Masterclass, because it covers all of these items. The lectures are aligned with the book. And so you can kind of follow along, reading one chapter, subsection, viewing the video, taking the quiz for that section, and then rinsing and repeating. If you follow a Monday through Friday schedule, you'll be able to complete all of the material within 16 weeks in probably about 20 minutes to a half hour a day. Each lecture has its own quiz. Each quiz and lecture are aligned with the exam day guide that we give you. And the exam day guide is designed in a way that helps you understand the material, but is also a reference that you can take with you into the exam. And so the goal of the course is to remove the guesswork and just give you what you need to be able to pass the exam, because you shouldn't have to piece together your entire study plan from random videos or random PowerPoints or scattered notes that you find online related to these topics. So we put together a free course where we do touch on some of the key important topics. If you double click into each and every one of these, it gives you a feel for the content, how we teach, and helps you understand kind of the elements that the exam is really testing. And what you'll notice in our lectures is some of kind of the real world experience that we've seen in auditors in audit. So when we're touching on an audit agenda or an opening meeting or a report or managing an audit program, we give you kind of our lived experience, strength, and hope. And, whether it's the free course or the full course, they help you start studying more strategically instead of trying to, build the plane as you're trying to fly it, as they say. And so if you're prepping for the CQA exam, I'd highly encourage you to consider our course, or at the very least, start with the free course. The link is below. Go through it, see if what we teach makes sense for you, and hopefully use it to build your study plan. And you can decide in the future if you want the full structure, quizzes, practice questions, and the 16-week path, so that you can pass the exam on the first try. The most important thing that I want you to get from this video is stop studying randomly and make sure that you're really thoughtful about the topics, because these exams don't prioritize everything equally. The CQA, like we said, is open book, but that doesn't mean that you can wing it. You need to make sure that you understand the audit process, you have and can practice audit judgment, that you know where your references are, not looking at them for the first time in the exam, and that you're focusing on the topics that connect multiple parts of exam and that have kind of the cross-cutting element, and have that cross-cutting element. Prepare for the ASQ CQA exam. If I wanted to pass it on the first try, subscribe to the channel, like the channel, and share with a friend. It really helps grow our content, and I will see you in the next video.